In the beginning, if you wanted to eat 3,000 calories, you'd have to find 3,000 calories, whether by hunting, gathering, or fishing. And you'd need to get even more food if you had dependents like children. Once the agricultural revolution started, denser communities could form. In the medium term, calories were decoupled. You wouldn't die if you didn't work for a few days or even a few weeks. Food would be there. In the long run, of course, if you didn't provide value to your tribe or community, you would perish. And today we're trying to decouple labor from income. We already have a version of this. It's called retirement. People work for 4 or more decades and they deposit a portion of their paycheck into a fund, and that grows and that's invested. And once they're 65 years old and they're ready to retire, they can simply live off that portfolio that they have accumulated and draw that down over the last 2 or 3 decades of their lives. But you don't really have to wait for retirement to decouple your labor from your income. Take the difference between a person who works at a McDonald's for, let's say, minimum wage versus someone who owns that McDonald's franchise. So the person who works every day as an employee will have to clock in and clock out and put in their 8 to 10 hours a day. And if they don't show up because they're sick or they can't make it to work, they might not get paid. Whereas the person who owns the McDonald's franchise probably has put in processes and put in employees and managers. So even if the person doesn't show up to their own franchise, they can still get paid. In the short to medium term, the store's probably going to keep running and the person will keep making their income. Now, of course, I'm not saying go out there and buy a business. For a lot of people, this is not practical. But what you can do is you can buy a piece of a business, right? So you can go out and buy shares in this McDonald's franchise. And why stop there? Why not go and buy shares in a bunch of companies? And that is what investing in ETFs is. You essentially buy small ownership shares in a broad collection of companies to diversify your risk. And if you keep investing over time, you will have enough to live off the gains that that portfolio generates. There are other ways of doing this. For example, patents and royalties. If you invent something and you copyright it and you trademark it, and you can license it out to a producer. And these people have the factories and the supply chains and the distribution to essentially produce and sell whatever it is you invented. And every time they make a sale of this widget, you get a cut. You might get 10 cents or 50 cents or $1 or more per unit that is sold. So if you think about this now, you could be asleep and someone on the other side of the world could walk into a store and purchase the thing that you invented, and there you have it. You just made some money. If you write a book, for example, every time that book is sold, you will get some money. Now, I don't mean to suggest that you have to completely stop working. That's not the point. The point is to decouple your labor from your income as quickly as you can, so you do not have to rely on performing labor to get your income. You can continue doing whatever it is you want to do, and income will continue to come in regardless. Number 2, all the actions that we take are simply to shift probabilities. Let's say you're an aggressive driver. You like to swerve through traffic like a douche, cut people off, and drive over the speed limit, and even run red lights once in a while. And you think, I'm getting to my destination faster, and I've been driving for 6 months in this way, and I haven't really got into an accident, so everything's fine. And this is a classic case of thinking in absolutes, whereas you should be thinking about probabilities. It is not that the two eventualities are that you will either get into a car crash or never get into a car crash, but rather that every time you drive in a dangerous way, that you are increasing the cumulative probability of getting into an accident. The probability that you will get into an accident increases over time. Think about smoking. There are people who have smoked all their lives and never had lung cancer. And there are people who barely even smoke and get lung cancer. But the idea is that if you smoke, you will increase your probability of getting lung cancer. And the more you smoke, the more that probability increases. If you eat processed meats filled with nitrates, it's not that that will either give you colorectal cancer or not give you colorectal cancer. It's that every time you eat it, you increase the probability. And the more of it you eat, the more that probability increases, all other things being equal. And I want to extend this way of thinking to not only probabilities, but also to understand this concept of intermediate states, that everything exists on a continuum that is between two extremes. Something may not be a failure or a success, but there could be degrees of success. And I see this more philosophically when people talk about the concept of freedom. They say either a society is free or it's not free. Whereas in reality, there are degrees of freedom. It may be tempting, for example, to call China a country that is not free. And that may be true when you compare it to a lot of Western liberal democracies. But China is certainly far freer a country than, for example, North Korea. Things are not black and white. They exist in a continuum. But know that your mind will always try to settle at either extremes, because these extremes and these absolutes are always less cognitively taxing. And we make this fallacy of thinking in binaries all the time. Freedom and autocracy, capitalism and socialism, good and bad, light and dark, fast and slow, rich and poor, happy and sad, smart and dumb, sane and crazy. So think in terms of continua and probabilities, not absolutes. Number 3. When we decide to show up early for an interview or a flight, we are using the concept of margin of safety. To reuse the aggressive driver example from before, changing lanes when you have a good deal of room or keeping a good deal of space between you and the car in front are all examples of margins of safety. If it takes you 30 minutes to get to an important meeting, maybe leave 45 minutes before. That's margin of safety. But we can apply to more important stuff, such as investing or valuing a company with acquisition in mind. Margin of safety is incredibly important. If you're valuing a stock and the share price comes out to $30 a share based on your analysis, and you realize it's trading at $27 a share, you have a 10% margin of safety. It may be prudent to purchase it. Whereas if your analysis shows that the stock should be priced at $30 a share, but is currently trading at $31, you really don't have any margin of safety there, so you might want to think twice about purchasing that stock. So perhaps you're renovating your house and you do the math and you realize that the projected budget is going to be $100,000. You might want to add an extra 20% on top just as a margin of safety. They could tear down a wall and find out some mold or some issues in the basement, and that might escalate into a bigger problem that you need more money for. So whenever there are unknowns to any endeavor that you undertake, always have a margin of safety built in. Number 4. So imagine you're working with a realtor trying to sell your home, and you have $1 million home that's listed. Now, you might think that the realtor and your objectives are aligned, and that may be partially true, but it's not always necessarily true. So think about it. You list your $1 million home in a neighborhood where other houses comparable to your home are all selling for around $1 million. Your realtor sets the price at $900,000. Now, at this much lower price, your house is going to sell really quickly. There might be even a little bidding war and you might come out ahead. But you might also not. That $100,000 that you might potentially be giving up on might be a lot of money for you, even after you deduct commissions and other costs. But for the realtor, it's not a lot of money. Furthermore, there is a lot of cost associated with the realtor selling at the market price. They have to do a lot of showings, they have to go back and forth, talk to different clients, deal with a lot of offers and so forth. Whereas if they priced your $1 million home at $900,000, they could sell it theoretically within a few days. Now, if your realtor was standing to make $30,000 in commissions from your $1 million home, and they instead sold it for $900,000, and let's just say they get $27,000, that's 10% less, that might be okay. They might be okay taking that cut, because now instead of 1 month or 2 months of work and showings and dealing with offers, now they just sold it in a couple of days. So they saved themselves a lot of time. Whereas for you, you just lost tens of thousands of dollars. Let's say you walk into a bank and you talk to a financial advisor. And this advisor offers you a bunch of products that he says is right for you, while he stands to make a commission from selling you these products. So the objective of this financial advisor is not to optimize your finances, but to optimize his commissions.
We're taking home cold hard cash via commission, mother.
This is called Cui Bono. Who stands to benefit? Always ask yourself the incentives of the person you are receiving information or help from. In this example, it might be better to go to a fee-only advisor, where they take some fee up front and then they'll advise you on how to optimize your finances and there is no conflict of interest. From buying a used car to designing economic policy, this concept is incredibly important. In China, for example, the subsidies that a local government receives is in proportion to the population size of that municipality. So now when these municipalities have to report their population, they will deliberately inflate their population to receive more subsidies. So local governments overreported their populations for years to receive more money. Always ask yourself, who stands to benefit? Cui Bono. Number 5. So imagine someone taking an entire year off to work on making a video game or writing a novel. And they work on this project for an entire year or longer. And finally, when they're ready to publish this game or publish this novel, they realize that it was a dud. So here, you always have to ask yourself, how fast is one iteration? How fast do you fail and how fast do you learn? There's nothing wrong with believing in what you're doing, but if you're new and you still have lots to learn, maybe start by making shorter games or write shorter stories. Fail faster and get feedback faster. And it's not only feedback from peers or reviewers, but also just feedback from the market. And this has happened to me personally too. When I started my channel in January of 2024, this year, I started making 5 videos in that month. And I consistently aimed to make about 3 to 4 videos a month. But right now, I only make about 1 or 2 videos a month because those videos that I made were kind of dog shit, but they gave me something very valuable. They gave me feedback and I learned a lot from them. And as I get better, and as my videos become more technically complex, it just takes longer and longer to make them. And that's fine, that's the way it should be. So my recommendation is to start by making smaller projects and simpler projects and using your learnings from those simpler projects and applying that to more complex projects. So always ask yourself, how fast is one iteration? How fast is one failure cycle? How fast can I fail and how fast can I learn? The key to getting better and learning faster is through practice. And the longer one practice cycle takes, the longer it will take you to learn. Alright guys, let me know if you guys already apply any of these concepts in your daily lives. Thanks for watching. Cheers.